And thank you all so much for joining today. Hello, hello, hello. Whether you are joining live or whether you decide, hey, maybe I want to catch this replay later in the week. Thank you all so much. So you may see another unfamiliar face, or perhaps you do know Lucy already. I am joined today by a wonderful special guest, Lucy Lantis, and we are talking about toxic or uncomfortable when it comes to the workplace. And y'all, this is a conversation that came up last week when I had another special guest, Linda Clark. The conversation was absolutely amazing as we were talking about disengagement. But the light bulb kind of went off in my head when we're talking about engagement. How does this connect to a toxic workplace? So we're going to go ahead and get straight into it. We don't want to waste any time. But Lucy, before we jump into it, I would love for you to introduce yourself and let us know what it is that you stand for and maybe some projects that you have going on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me for a second time, Lapora. I love being in conversation with you, and I never pass up the opportunity to do so. I'm Lucy Lantis. I'm an organizational facilitator and speaker. And what that means is I help teams connect deeper to really intentionally create workplace cultures that are authentic to them, but also aligned with their mission, their values, who they want to be, and where they want to go. I primarily work locally here in Omaha, but I also have a few projects that take me regionally. And I love this work and I love these types of conversations, which are really at the heart of what it is that I do. So excited to dig in.
All right, that's good because we're going to do just that. All right, y'all. So if you have comments, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I know that Lucy will be absolutely thrilled to answer those questions. I will be passing them over to her. Maybe some of them I'll address, but Lucy is the expert here today. So we're going to be talking about all the good things. All right, Lucy. Question number one. This is going to be so. How do we tell the difference? That's probably my biggest question is how do we tell the difference between a workplace that's toxic versus one that is just uncomfortable?
It's a big question. And can I like back it up a minute to
Yeah,
like think
absolutely.
through this word? Because I think it's kind of a buzzword, right? We hear it a lot. And I think before we get into some of those definitions, I want to open with I absolutely do believe there are toxic workplaces, without a doubt, and I have seen some of them. But I think the word has become somewhat overused. And I think through social media, there's been a lot of like therapy speak that, people take words like gaslighting and narcissism and triggered and clinical psychological words and apply them into their workplace, and it sometimes can miss the mark of what it truly is. And so you can have a workplace where there are things going on that are not ideal, that are uncomfortable or dysfunctional, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a toxic workplace environment. And so the word itself to me is like it's a big thing to really understand what that means, what that looks like, and how to differentiate so that we're not overusing something and kind of losing the meaning behind it. How does that land with you?
That lands I get that. I guess the question then comes up, right? Because I get that aspect. But then it comes up, well, what about the different perspectives that people have? So let's say you and I both are working in the same environment, and my experience may be
Mm,
something that I am viewing as being toxic. We are in the exact same experience. We have the exact same supervisor. I'm just,
yeah.
you know, and you don't see it that way. Then does that make it to where one person's experience is, I don't want to say invalidated, but how does that affect one experience over the other?
Yeah. A wonderful point, a great question. And I don't know if there's an answer to that because we are within a system in a
Yeah.
workplace, and yet we all have our very unique experience because of the lens and how we show up and what we bring. So I think in thinking about, I try to think of like the spectrum, of like maybe toxic is on this far end. This is as bad as it gets. And on the other end, we have a flourishing workplace. And then on the middle, towards flourishing might be functional. And then more towards toxic, it's dysfunctional. And so I think a lot of the things that happen may fall on that spectrum, but may not consistently be toxic. But I think we can start to just throw out that word and that language. And so whether you have that idea of what's toxic or I do, I think it sparks a lot of great conversation around
Yeah.
what is on the spectrum. What do we find unacceptable about this? And really digging into the way those lived experiences shape the way we're seeing it.
One thing you just mentioned, Lucy, and it didn't click until you said it. So that's why it's great to have these conversations. You said consistent. Like, what are we
Yeah.
like it there is this spectrum where it may not necessarily be something that is consistent. And then that brings up, okay, so we may have these uncomfortable moments, or we may have these uh leaning towards more the toxic moments, but what are we seeing a majority of the time to define the actual workplace? Because that in and of itself, I feel like, is a huge difference. Like, if someone is going home tired, drained, are they going home tired and drained because of the hard work that they're putting in, or are they being harvested in a toxic workplace, right? But
Mhm.
it's what is
Mhm.
happening consistently. And I think that honestly that brings a little bit of ownership back to us in being able to look at how does that feel for us? How does that experience how is that experience lining up? So that I appreciate that one word and how you used it in that demonstration. That was good.
I'm so glad you said that because that's everything, right? Is this an anecdotal thing, a one-time thing, or a few times things, or is this the consistent experience? And I think that really lends to it's about how what leadership tolerates and enables, that becomes what's consistent. So if these things happen in a bubble here and there, that's one thing. If it is known and vocalized and said and time again, like people know this is a part of the consistent um, norms and day to day, and leadership knows that and allows that, like that is that's the root cause there. Because I think when I have seen toxic workplace cultures, I would say it's primarily because leadership itself is toxic. Fear based energy gets passed down. And when there is like people operating from a place of power and their own motive, and they're doing this work to get ahead themselves and be seen a certain way, that has like a ripple down effect. And so I think if you have leadership who's allowing these things to happen, that's a huge part of what's making it toxic.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Well, so really quick, before we jump into any further, as people are logging in, tuning in, if you have questions, if you have comments, feel free to type those in the chat. Happy to answer those. Happy to read them out loud and see, where this conversation can go. Because this isn't a or Lucy and I met before, but I was like, oh, I don't really want to talk about everything
Yeah.
now. Like, let's have the conversation in a few
Yes.
minutes when we go live. So this is how growth happens, though, when we are able to talk about these things. I will say that when I first posted
Mhm.
this about us speaking, I know that Yolanda had a really good point and kind of like a question. So I'll go ahead and bring that one up,
Okay.
because one of the things that I absolutely enjoy focusing on is how the system or the organization, whether they're written rules or unwritten rules, how does that affect how we can engage and bring value into the workplace? And one of the questions, or it was more of like a thought, which was really good though. But one of the things that Yolanda mentioned was, can we engage in a toxic environment? So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very possible, and many people do, and it doesn't mean that their experience is a positive one. But I think there are people in every workplace who are who are there to work hard and deliver and do their best, and can continue to deliver even amidst that environment It's just for how long?
Oh,
Like how long until it's not going to work anymore and they have to move on or they can't tolerate it, or I think it comes at a cost. So I certainly think it's possible, but I think there's a price to pay for that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts too, because I know when you posted this, you said this came up in a conversation last week and it
yeah.
got your wheels turning. And I'd love to hear what was going on in your brain as you were hearing that word and what came up for Lapora.
Yeah. So a lot of things came up, honestly. A lot of things came up. One of the things that came up, and actually I even asked this during the live, was what do we mean? And there wasn't time to answer that then and there
Yeah.
because it was a different topic and I was just kind of going down a little rabbit hole. But like I'm doing now. But but like what do we mean when we say it? Because we hear it so often, or I have heard it so often. I'll only speak for myself here. And there have been times in the past. One of the first things that came up for me was there have been times in the past where people have used that word toxic or hostile, and I didn't see it. I didn't see the toxicity. I didn't see the hostileness, which kind of brings in why I asked earlier, maybe
Yeah.
one person perspective versus another. But what I did see was I saw someone who did not like the way things were being done.
Hmm.
And it did not sit well with them. And so as we're having this conversation last week, that experience is going through my mind
Yeah.
as far as where where is this coming from and which perspective is it? And the other part that was going through my mind was I have to be careful, which I'm sure many others do as well, with determining what truly is toxic versus not. Honestly, that's not my place.
Hmm.
I say this as coming from not in a leadership role because I feel like that would be slightly different,
Hmm.
but from an untitled leadership perspective, or maybe it is, and we can have a conversation, but it's not my place to determine or validate or to say this is the experience. And I'm trying to lean in more to not proving someone is right, not proving someone is wrong, but just trying to understand of when you say that this is a toxic environment for you, what do you mean? What are
Yeah.
the qualifiers for that? What is the criteria for that? So yeah, in a matter of like 30 seconds, all of those things were going through my
Yeah.
mind.
It's so
And
good.
I couldn't express it all because it wasn't the place for it, but I was glad to have that conversation and to kind of have that reminder of, what I think about whenever I hear the word used.
It's so good. And I think to everything you're saying and your point is like when you are in a healthy and flourishing workplace, there's actually space for those conversations to happen because people meet those concerns with curiosity and kind of a tell me more
Yeah.
rather than shutting it down or like kind of isolating that person as the person who always has a problem with something or whatever that judgment may be in a workplace where people hear that and they actually want to understand their experience and get clear on it and do better. That right there to me is like a green flag of a workplace, and that doesn't happen everywhere. And so it's almost like a little bit of a litmus test, like what gets heard and what gets shut down is a really great starting point.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I'm definitely with you on that one because I love looking at organizations from the aspect of what does get allowed, what does get accepted,
Yeah.
what does get rewarded. And to your point of when people feel safe,
Mhm.
that is when these types of things can come up. The other part of when you said that came up for me is I thought about, I know we talk a lot about psychological
Mhm.
safety, and
Yeah.
this is kind of like on that other aspect where I think sometimes when we look at it, we look at it as it's a place for us to bring our emotions and our feelings, which they are. But I also see it as an opportunity to have, and I think even Amy Edmondson mentioned this, to have
Mm.
difficult conversations, like
Yes.
in a space where it doesn't mean that everything is going to be unicorns and rainbows,
Yes.
but when those conversations need to be had, it's an opportunity to have that as well. And I think that if we can look at the a healthy workplace isn't absent of uncomfortableness. It isn't absent of difficult conversations, but
Yeah.
it is inclusive of it in a way where everyone can express their viewpoints. And I feel like that's kind of where my mind goes as well with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you ask, like, what are some of the traits that would qualify toxic? I think it's a subjective question in some ways, but I think what's worked for me, mindset wise or framework wise, is to really determine, like, you could just start with what is a healthy functional behavior in a workplace. So let's say we're taking the topic of conflict. Function, or let's say healthy and flourishing would be direct, open, people listen to each other. Like, those are some of the traits. That's ideal. If we go more to that middle ground, closer to like dysfunctional, maybe it's like passive aggressive or avoidant, don't have the conversation altogether. So it's like, then you go the far opposite. And to me, that's where you get into toxic territory, is when you move from those dysfunctional things into what would be the opposite of that, is explosive, like
Yeah.
people disrespecting, people screaming at each other, that lack of safety. That's when it starts to get into toxic territory. And I think you can do that process with any type of trait. So, like, let's take like recognition. In a flourishing workplace, there's a system in place where people are regularly recognized and celebrated. It's a process, and it's just normalized, it's consistent.
Yeah.
You start getting into that kind of dysfunctional place, it's like it just doesn't really happen, or it's rare, or it's not in the way that people really want it. That's not ideal. To get toxic is the only time that people are being um, spotlit is to criticize them or shame them or humiliate them for what they haven't done. So that helps me think through kind of the trajectory of that spectrum and get further along away from dysfunctional into this place where, yeah, psychological safety is really non-existent. It feels like more abusive management. That to me is what screams, okay, toxic. Because toxic, it's like it's poisonous, it's dangerous. That's
Yeah.
how I make sense of it.
I really like that a lot. And I know you earlier you already had mentioned like that, going from being healthy to dysfunctional to more toxic, but how you just broke it down there, like that was. I hope people were taking notes. If they're not, I don't know what to tell y'all. Go back and watch the replay because that was really good. That was really good because I do feel like having some type of. I mean, not everything needs to be measured, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in this case, when we're looking at maybe doing a self, not a self inventory, but what is toxic for us, or maybe even as a leader, when we're looking at the team, what how is this working for the team? Looking at what are we doing all of the time? I think we could even,
Yes.
what's going on all the time? What is happening occasionally? What are the effects of that? And then what is happening to the extent of the morale is down. People are drained. Like people are getting burnt out. Like that is really, really good, Lucy. So I really hope that people are taking note of that because I love that so much.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
thanks
you.
for
And
sharing that.
this is the power of these conversations. This is
Yeah,
stuff that kind of lives in my head, right? And it's how I think of things. Talking to you, I'm like, what? I need to make a framework out of this, or I need to make a tool
yeah,
out of this, right? Because I find, to your point in the very beginning, we all have such a subjective experience. And this could be a source of conversation for people to think through, well, what's your version of dysfunctional versus toxic?
yeah,
And then you really know what you're working with. And I think people kind of get over too many assessments, but conversation around this kind of stuff, I don't naturally see happening in workplaces without a facilitator or somebody brought in to do this. And so
yeah,
I think if we can normalize creating spaces where it is okay to talk through some of these things without getting too much into the details,
yeah,
it's helpful for people to think through it and to understand their own experience better.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, framework that quick.
Let's do that together. How about that? We got a new
Okay.
project idea.
No, yeah, that's good. So you mentioned as far as with being able to have the conversation. So, and let me know because I know like this, there's no established framework yet. But if so, from a leadership perspective, and then from a team member perspective, can you provide like how can people have these conversations? Because some of the people who are watching, let's start with the team member, they are not in a leadership role, but
Yeah.
they see it. Or maybe they have coworkers who see it and they're trying to figure out what what they can do to help change that environment if they can do anything. So what would they how would they go about it? And then we'll touch into the leadership perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think peer to peer, if that's what we're talking about, I think that is a great opportunity to have these types of candid conversations to see, does my experience track with people at the same level as me? And I'm
That's
big
good.
on always going to what are the organizational values. If those are being utilized in the right way, they're not just performative on the wall, they should be an anchor to behaviors. And so being able to talk through the behaviors they're seeing, is it out of alignment or in alignment with values? That's like a basis for conversation that should go up to the next level. So then it comes to, what type of relationship do you have with your supervisor or leadership or whomever? Is it psychologically safe enough to be able to bring that? And so for some people, they'd say, hell no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And for some, they would say, yeah, I think my manager would be so receptive to this and to elevating it, to being an advocate for this. And that's ideal. That's what we would hope for. And so I think it really just depends on that relational dynamic and trust about how to move it on to the next level.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. And I guess it would be very similar then for a leadership perspective as well, but I don't want to assume. So just to clarify, would that be similar there?
Yeah, to me, this is like the good stuff that should be happening in those C-suite and leadership team, like group work dynamics. Like this should be the kind of stuff that people are talking about and working about and saying, how do we do better so that we can start naming and aligning behaviors and have that be instilled into middle managers, and then and on we go. So I think that's the hope. It's just, what's the dynamic of that leadership team and or that C-suite team, and what's the dynamic of the CEO? Because oftentimes, if there's toxicity happening, it can start at that top level, and in that case, they may not be receptive to that, and they may not be receptive to bringing someone in to have these conversations because they don't want to change, like they don't want this
Right.
stuff eliminated. And so that is where it gets tricky, and where I've had many conversations with folks at different levels where it's kind of like, as long as they are in this role, there's, you can do what you can at your level, but that person is not going to change, and you kind of have to either accept that you can make things at this level what feels right, but you can't change up here, and sometimes that means people have to leave, and it's an unfortunate truth, but
Yeah.
in order for you to get where you need to go and protect your peace, and if a CEO is toxic and not leaving, then you might have to move on.
Yeah. No, that is unfortunate, but yeah, I see it all the time. And to your point, in regards to not necessarily making an organizational change, I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I feel like you're in my brain here. Sometimes we cannot change things at an organizational level, but maybe there is a warm handoff that we can do.
Yeah.
Maybe there is some type of peer support group that we can do. And so making those changes within the little ecosystem that we have,
Yes.
the smaller one,
Mhm.
and maybe that is enough for short term to maybe
Yeah.
to see if we can last a little bit longer. But if that doesn't work, then to your point, absolutely there are other choices that are available. And it reminds me, it doesn't remind me, but it kind of brings up the idea of when I think back a little bit about your framework and everything that we've been speaking about, that if we remove the word toxic from our
Mhm.
vocabulary for just a week, I
Yeah.
feel like it would allow us the opportunity to describe the behavior.
Yeah.
To you know
Yes.
what I mean? To instead of
Mhm.
saying that something is toxic, what is the behavior that we are tying to this. And I think that even a week worth
Yes.
of doing that, in addition to having those conversations that you recommended and connecting with others, I think we would get a whole bunch of clarity. But this is why you do what you do, Lucy. I feel like, because you're bringing the good ideas, the things that people can take action on, not just, long term, but what is something that they can do maybe even starting tomorrow. And I feel like this conversation is
Mm.
going to be a really good start for a lot of people.
I love that, and I love what you said because it is all behaviors, and sometimes we cling to these buzzwords like toxic because it fills in a lot of the blanks, and so much of culture work can start as just a feeling. People know when they walk into a workplace if they have a terrible feeling, an anxious feeling, a knot in their stomach, or if they walk in vibrant and energized. That can be the first step to really starting to thinking about your culture. But like you said, you have to actually then move from feeling or a blanket statement like toxic and get into the nitty gritty of what is creating that. Those are
Right.
symptoms. So what are the behaviors that are making that environment feel that way? And that is the beauty of culture work, is as soon as you have understanding of that, now we can make changes. Now we can actually, get in there and say, all right, well, we're agreeing that this isn't what we want. So what do we want? And then it's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I don't see any comments or any questions yet. Hopefully people follow up with you, because I really feel like I know I've been to your workshops and I've seen like what you bring to the table, and I know that there is just so much more that people can gain from having that conversation with you, and even bringing you into their organizations, getting a little bit deeper into that conversation. As we prepare to close here, to wrap down here, I think about one of the ways that Adam Grant had defined a toxic environment is he said that it's created by the takers that sap the
Mm,
energy out of the givers.
yeah. Yes,
I was
I
like,
heard
oh.
that talk before.
And it
Yeah.
makes so much sense, because like a lot of times when especially actually the conversation that I had last week with Linda, when she was talking about how at certain points when you have the 99% and they're doing so much, and then you have the supervisors that are constantly saying give us more, it's just like
Yeah.
just taking
Take your soul. Yeah. Yes.
taking all of the energy that people have and creating an environment where that's normalized. So that consistency. So this
Oh,
is
it is.
every I'm so
So
excited because
good.
everything is it's all
We are
connecting.
connected. It is. And you are the weaver of this all, like bringing all this out. It's so important in these conversations. Put this stuff on people's radar, things that maybe they're feeling and not actually thinking about or talking about. So I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to you for creating the space for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lucy. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Well, Lucy, if people want to reach out to you and they say, gosh darn it, I should have asked Lucy a question. I didn't. I should have comment, but I didn't. How can people reach out to you?
yes. Shoot me an email at lucy@inwardinquiry.com, or you can go to my website and just send me a contact form, just www.inwardinquiry.com. Or, hey, I love LinkedIn. Shoot me a LinkedIn message. Keep it casual.
Perfect. I am typing slowly here.
Thank you.
Let's put that up here. All right. Did that pop up correctly? Did I?
Did.
All
Yes.
right.
Thank
Because sometimes I misspell a word or
you. You
two.
nailed it.
Okay. Perfect. 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 All right. So, Lucy, once again, thank you so much for your time and for joining me here on today. I really appreciate it. And this has been such a great conversation. And I have learned so much from having you here. And I hope that others have learned so much as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being a wonderful thought partner and such a just dynamic thinker. I love that about you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week. Please remember to stay adding value. All right, y'all. Have a good one.